Imagine a world where aging is just a thing of the past. A world where death, at least from natural causes, simply doesn't happen anymore. Now, I know it sounds like pure science fiction, but what if it's way closer than we think? And maybe more importantly, what would actually happen to us, to humanity, if we pulled it off?
This whole wild idea really hinges on a concept that scientists call longevity escape velocity, or LEV for short. Think of it like a tipping point. Right now, for every single year of medical research we do, our life expectancy goes up, but by less than a year. LEV is that magic moment when the ratio flips. It's when science starts adding more than 1 year of life expectancy for every single year that passes. You get this incredible feedback loop of ever-increasing lifespans.
And what's so fascinating is how this idea could just snowball. The biogerontologist Aubrey de Grey puts it this way. Once we crack that 150-year barrier, the technology to reach 1,000 years old might follow shockingly fast. So the real challenge, the big gap, isn't getting from 150 to 1,000. It's getting from where we are now to 150. It just shows you the potential runaway effect of LEV.
And listen, this isn't some distant, far-off dream. Some of the leading minds in futurism and genetics think this could be right around the corner. Ray Kurzweil, he's predicting we could hit LEV as early as 2035. Aubrey de Grey gives it a 50-50 shot of happening in the mid to late 2030s. And the geneticist George Church points to 2050 as a real possibility. The consensus is pretty clear. We are talking about decades, not centuries.
So in this explainer, we're going to look at this from every possible angle. First, we'll get into the science, the actual quest for immortality. Then we'll dive into what could be a total societal nightmare, a world without death. After that, we'll look at the deep psychological burden of living forever, and finally, we'll get to the ultimate paradox of what it even means to be human.
Okay, so how are scientists actually trying to defeat aging? Well, it's not about finding some magical fountain of youth. It's something way more systematic.
The leading approach is something called SENSE, which stands for Strategies for Engineered Negligible Senescence. It's basically a divide-and-conquer strategy. It treats aging not as one big disease, but as a bunch of different types of damage that build up over time. So for example, to fight cancerous cells, which basically become immortal by using this telomere-lengthening machinery, the strategy is to just remove that machinery. For the cell loss we get in our hearts and brains, you use stem cells and tissue engineering to rebuild what's been lost. The whole idea isn't to stop the damage from ever happening, but to just go in periodically and clean it all up. Kind of like doing regular maintenance on a classic car to keep it running forever.
So the science is absolutely fascinating, right? But what if it works? What if we actually succeed? This is where that optimistic quest for eternal life could crash headfirst into an absolute societal nightmare.
I mean, that's the most fundamental question we would have to face, because achieving immortality breaks the most basic rule of biology, right? The cycle of life and death that has governed this planet for billions of years. So, what happens when we break that cycle?
Let's just start with the most obvious problem, population. We're already at over 8 billion people. Now imagine a world where the death rate basically drops to 0, but people keep having kids. The math is simple, and honestly, it's terrifying. Our planet's resources are finite. Removing death as a natural check on our population would spark a crisis like we've never seen before.
We'd be forced into making choices that are almost unimaginable today. I mean, would we need strict globally enforced birth control? Would we have to start this massive push for off-world colonization just to find somewhere to put everyone? And what about society itself? If nobody ever retires or steps aside, you get permanent stagnation. Jobs would never open up, power structures could be frozen in place for centuries.
This quote from the publication Philosophicum just puts it so bluntly. An immortal being, by its very nature, is something that just endlessly consumes. And in a universe of finite resources, from planets to jobs, an immortal population becomes a species of, well, endless leeches, potentially outliving every single resource they depend on.
So, beyond all these huge societal problems, there's an even more personal challenge, the psychological cost of living forever. I mean, are our minds even built for eternity?
Mortality shapes everything about who we are. Having finite time, that's what gives us motivation. I mean, think about your bucket list. It exists because you know time is limited. The rarity of an experience, like seeing a total solar eclipse, is what gives it value. The fact that risk exists allows for things like courage. But in an immortal life, what happens to all that? With infinite time, why would you do anything today? When you can experience everything, does anything feel special anymore? And if you're basically invulnerable, how can you ever be brave?
Philosophers and psychologists warn about this potential downward spiral. First, you might get something called identity fatigue, where centuries of memories just pile up and blur who you even are anymore. Then comes motivational collapse, the ultimate procrastination. That leads to this unbearable boredom, where nothing feels new. And maybe the most painful part of all, infinite grief. You would watch entire civilizations rise and fall. You'd outlive every single person, every relationship you ever held dear.
You know, Steve Jobs really captured this perfectly. He said that knowing he was going to die was the most important tool he had because it stripped away all the external expectations and fear, leaving only what was truly important. It created focus, it created meaning. And if you take away that awareness of death, you risk taking away the very thing that helps us find a purpose in our lives.
And all of this brings us to the ultimate paradox of immortality. We're in this race to solve maybe the greatest technical challenge in human history, but solving it might create an even greater human challenge.
The problem completely shifts from one of science to one of science, philosophy, and meaning. We're so focused on asking, can we do it? But the more important question becomes, should we do it? And if we do, who are we on the other side? It stops being a technical debate, and it becomes a debate about the very nature of what it means to be human.
And here it is, the core of it all, the great irony. In this quest to gain an infinite quantity of life, we might accidentally engineer away everything that gives life its quality. We might gain all the time in the world, but lose the very things that make that time worth living. Urgency, value, meaning, even love.
So we're left with this massive question. If our mortality is what forces us to create meaning, to value our time, and to live with some kind of purpose, then is a life without an end ultimately a life without a point? That might be the most important question we have to answer before this science fiction becomes our reality.